Well, if it isn't Mogul Khan the Axe, Dota's own retaliating punching bag. Built to take a beating, Axe is here to rudely interrupt your conversations and slap you in the head for telling him to leave. If you're brave enough to solo offlane with him, you can bully your enemies into submission, call their mamas fat, and execute them for their troubles. Lights, camera, action. It's the history of Axe. Axe is a tanky initiator who likes to get into the middle of a fight to disrupt, and generally be an awful nuisance to everybody. Berserker's Call is an AoE spell that taunts enemy units around Axe, forcing them to attack him for a set amount of time. Over the duration, Axe will gain bonus armor, mitigating some of the damage coming his way. Battle Hunger is a single target spell that damages and slows an enemy over a set duration or until they kill another unit. Axe will also gain a small amount of movement speed for every enemy affected by Battle Hunger. Counter Helix is a passive spell. When attacked, Axe has a chance to perform an AoE counterattack which deals pure damage to all enemies around him. Axe's ultimate is Culling Blade. Normally, this spell will deal a small amount of damage when cast on an enemy. However, if the enemy is under a certain HP threshold, Culling Blade will instantly kill them. If this is the case, the cooldown will also be reset, and Axe, along with all nearby allies, will gain a buff to their movement speed and attack speed. Due to the way this skill is programmed, Culling Blade can instantly kill enemies even if they're affected by Shallow Grave or False Promise. Let that be a lesson to you. Natural selection is big, red, and angry.
I want to die.
Axe jumped into Dota on March 1st, 2005 during patch 6.00. Using the Chaos Orc version of Grom Hellscream as a base model, Mogul Khan entered the battle looking for a fight. Like a handful of other heroes, Axe has the joke name of Mogul Can't Touch This, which is ironic given that one of his spells literally forces you to touch him. Although I can see a resemblance, both Grom and MC Hammer have atrocious taste in pants. In his first edition run, Axe started life as an agility hero. This could possibly mean that he was meant to be played more as a carry rather than a tank. Or the decision could have been made so that his build path led to more agility items, which naturally increase armor. Despite this, Axe's abilities have stayed the same since the beginning with a few differences in the numbers. Berserker's Call initially had a gigantic radius and lasted 3.5 seconds at all levels. Battle Hunger was pretty bare, merely doing magical damage over time without any additional effects to movement speed. Counter Helix also dealt universal damage, and had a scaling proc chance as you leveled it up. Finally, Culling Blade had a much narrower difference between its damage and kill threshold. Imagining Axe as an agility hero nowadays seems really fun, especially given all the potential items he could build to dish out punishment. Given how useful Berserker's Call is though, I can see why people would put him into the initiator role. His first bit of lore was also pretty brief. It just says that he's an agile melee hero, adept at manipulating his opponents. In a later patch, his lore was updated to mention Mogul Khan as the leader of the half-tribe of the Bloodied Axe clan. Although he was slain by human paladins in a war between the humans and orcs, demons revived him and used him for their own purposes. A huge revision came to Axe in 6.03, changing him from an agility hero to a strength hero. Probably the right choice at the time, as he's held such an iconic status as a tank since then. Also, could you imagine what Axe would look like today if he stayed an agility hero? In 6.09, Berserker's Call took a huge hit, reducing the radius. I don't know if you can tell what 100 radius looks like, but you'd have to be standing nuts to butts with your target to even think about getting that activation off. Counter Helix also had some small nerfs, increasing its cooldown and removing its ability to damage wards. In 6.10, a few reasonable changes were made to Axe's skills. Berserker's Call had its radius increased, but overall nerfed the duration. Counter Helix had its damage type changed from universal to physical. Its overall damage was reduced, but the proc chance was rescaled to make up for it. Culling Blade also received an interesting change, as there was a decrease of the normal damage the spell did, but the kill threshold increased to the point where I'd say that this was an overall buff. From there, a whole wave of minor changes happened, mostly tweaking numbers or fixing bugs. The next major alteration happened in 6.65, where Mogul Khan received his first Aghanim Scepter upgrade. This would simply reduce Culling Blade's cooldown to 20 seconds at all levels. That is, until 6.67, where the Ag's effect would reduce the cooldown to 15 seconds instead. 6.68 gave Battle Hunger its first functionality change, causing the spell to slow targets for 8% as long as the spell is active. 6.69 reduced the Ag's cooldown yet again, this time from 15 to 10 seconds, and it also increased the movement slow on Battle Hunger from 8% to 10%, which doesn't seem like much at first, because it's not. Axe was ported into Heroes of Newerth as Legionnaire, a Vin Diesel looking character with a Mike Tyson face tattoo. Originally, Legionnaire was a direct port of Axe, with his skills being named Taunt, Terrify, Whirling Blade, Decapitate, and a Staff of the Master's upgrade named Decapitate All. Unlike most characters in other MOBAs, Legionnaire is one of many acting as a regular foot soldier in the Legion's army instead of a hero with a unique backstory. Kind of lame when you think about it, and his voice lines don't do him any justice either, sounding as generic and bland as he is.
War is coming for the Whirling Blade. Someone will get the axe.
Although he started out faithful to Axe like CJ from San Andreas, his skills changed over time and he ended up being a traitor, like Big Smoke. All you had to do was follow the damn skills, Legion. The first skill rework happened in version 0302, which dropped Terrify in favor of Terrifying Charge. Activating this allows Legion to charge toward an enemy, dealing a percentage of his attack damage on the target, and apply a debuff that causes the enemy's damage to decrease by 50% while increasing their attack speed by the same amount. So although the enemy ends up outputting the same amount of damage in theory, this allows Legionnaire to get off more Whirling Blade procs. The next modification to a skill happened in 2.014, which changed Whirling Blade's percentage proc chance with a charge system that reduced the overall RNG involved. In a later update, the proc chance would be based off of how many charges Legionnaire has on him at any given time, and it automatically activates on the 12th attack. This made it so his usefulness in a teamfight would be much more consistent, not leaving your biggest form of damage to chance. This updated version of Legionnaire does have more stability than Axe, and it really fits in with Han's faster paced gameplay. Not sure how it would do in Dota 2, but it's fun to dream, isn't it? Before I move on from Han, I can't have a video about Axe without bringing up Meraxis. He's not like Axe at all in terms of gameplay, but he's got puns to put Axe to shame.
I'll make them relax. Shouldn't we ask for directions? Don't know. You'd better ask somebody.
Axe has some semi-ports in other games, but they're not nearly as direct as Legionnaire. In League of Legends, Darius and Rammus appear most similarly to Axe. Darius for his overall look, his chase and tank gameplay, and a dunking ultimate which also fears and slows enemies, as well as resetting its cooldown upon a successful execution. Rammus is much more about getting in to taunt someone, while returning their physical damage and gaining armor through defensive ball curl. Heroes of the Storm has Garrosh, which is befitting considering he's Grom Hellscream's son. In addition to looking most like the original Axe, Garrosh has a tanky, get-in-your-face style gameplay, and one of his heroic abilities, Warlord's Challenge, is just a straight-up Berserker's Call. On the other hand, his other heroic, Decimate, is just a simple spin, looking suspiciously a lot like Counter Helix. Even though Garrosh might not be as flashy as the other examples here, I don't think he needs to be. I mean, look at him. He has a face that says, "If you have an ass, I'll kick it," even if his nipples look like milk duds. Axe chopped his way into Dota 2 in the International 1 during August of 2011. Here, you can see him retain a lot of qualities from the Grom Hellscream model. He's red, he's buff, he's angry, but he's also, kinda stupid. The hero started out as a grunt in the Red Mist army, and he had aspirations to achieve the rank of general. After battling for 7 years in the campaign of the Thousand Tarns, he worked his way up to the general status, although he was the only one left after all the other members died for one reason or another. One of the reasons being that Axe just killed any superiors without hesitation to rise up the ranks. Thankfully, Axe has a long list of item sets with descriptions that really pad out his backstory and personality. The set that expands upon the Red Mist the most is the Forge Master's Tools, where the Forge Master's Mask item explains that warriors in the Red Mist army were also expected to be master weaponsmiths. The logic here being that if the weapons failed the warrior on the battlefield, they would have no one to blame but themselves. The Forge Master's hammer also says that the only day that Axe declared defeat was the day he tried to forge a weapon with an axe. You see that? He's a buffoon. The Proof of Courage item also gives some insight into the culture of the army. It reads that cowards were made to cut their hair in shame. Axe has neither known fear, nor shame, nor a barber. By my count, Axe also has the most cosmetic items based on in-game items. These are the Guard of the Red Mist, which is based on Vanguard, Nightmare Blade, which is based on Abyssal Blade, Reaver, and Little Blink Dagger. You can also include the Molten Claw, which is Axe's personal version of Blade Mail, and it also changes the in-game icon to match this. If you were to build Axe to match all of these cosmetic items, you should be in for a good time. They're all appropriate to build on the big lummox. Next up, while I was reading all of the item descriptions, I noticed that Axe has a hobby of robbing and looting. To give you a quick idea, he has pillaged from the legendary General Saberhorn, a footman of a crushed empire, the bodies of his execution victims, a warlord, a demonic war god, an officer of the Blood Mist army, the sorcerer king of Valhesi, a nobleman, the last red guard of Ogdaroon, some guy, and an ancient king. I would honestly ask him to stop, but he'd probably kill me and then steal my cat, Dazzle. On November 21st, 2013, Axe received a model update to change his hair from a ponytail to a more wild, untamed look. Given the other model changes that happened during this patch, this was done most likely to avoid having heroes that look too closely to Blizzard's characters, just like how Skeleton King was changed to Wraith King. May we never forget. On November 17th, 2015, The Last Castle was released, a comic focusing on Axe just before he joined the War of the Ancients. In this, Axe is raiding a castle for, and I quote, "a big 7 Jeweled Crown. This story expands on Axe's motivations and presumably takes place after his involvement in the Red Mist army. It turns out he's hired a puny bard named Goodkind to write about his adventures and spread his glory throughout the world in the form of books. This matches up with his original desire for notoriety in the lore, so being immortalized through stories does seem like a natural progression. He easily makes his way through the castle, murdering everyone with his weapon and sometimes his fists. By the end of it, he reaches the throne room and encounters the Sorcerer King, who forfeits his crown and engages in a fight with Axe. If at this point there is anything I want you to be sure of, it's that you should definitely never fight with Mogul Khan. Even though Axe gets to live out a body swap fantasy, he manages to out-trick the king, reclaiming his body and making another bestseller in the process. By the end of the comic, Axe is ready to set off for his next adventure. Goodkind suggests traveling north to a place where heroes are gathering to fight, and the rest is history. The first of the significant changes happened in 6.79, where all of Axe's skills had some kind of alteration. Berserker's Call's radius increased a bit, Battle Hunger had its damage and duration reduced, while its movement speed, slow, and bonus was increased, and the spell also became dispellable. Counter Helix had its cooldown reduced, and gained the ability to hit siege creeps. Culling Blade had a lot more going on, but most importantly, the spell no longer goes on cooldown when it kills a hero. It also applies an attack speed bonus to allied heroes within a range upon executing a target. Finally, the Aghanim Scepter bonus increases the speed duration, in addition to the kill threshold. In 6.81, Counter Helix started using PRNG to determine its proc chance, allowing for more consistency, which is always nice to have. 6.84 had a handful of changes, the most crucial happening to Counter Helix. The damage is no longer reduced by damage block, which is pretty great for dishing out the pain. However, it now triggers when attacks land rather than when they start. This ended up reducing a lot of his overall damage output, especially if you built evasion. Maybe this isn't the most important thing that happened to him this patch, but his win rate dropped about 5% when this happened, so it's a good indication of a nerf if nothing else. Conversely, in 6.87, Counter Helix went from dealing physical damage to pure, even though the damage was reduced a bit to make up for it. However, a much bigger buff came for Axe with the changes to Blade Mail. In this patch, it started to return damage before any kind of reductions, and it returns the same type of damage that was received. With this, the armor from Berserker's Call would not be considered for the damage calculation back to the target. Simply put, this boosted the damage output for Axe when initiating on a mob of enemies. On top of this, the item no longer ignores spell immune enemies, making those pesky BKBs and repels mere relics of the past. And of course, the numbers don't lie, as Axe's win rate shot up around 8% in this patch, rocketing him back into relevance in the professional and pub scene alike. 7.00's talents are, okay, moving on. In 7.06, Axe's Aghanim's upgrade was reworked, and instead of reducing the cooldown of Culling Blade, it now causes Battle Hunger to reduce 30% of the damage output on the afflicted targets. It also causes Culling Blade to apply Battle Hunger on all enemies within 700 range of a successful cull. If you have enough gold to pick this up, you're probably already stomping the enemy anyway, so my advice, buy it as soon as you can. It may be satisfying to win, but putting your enemy in their place by physically lowering their power? Absolutely exquisite. 7.07 renewed his talents, giving him much more interesting ones in the late game. An extra 120 Battle Hunger damage per second, especially in conjunction with his Axe upgrade, is fun for causing havoc everywhere, while that 100 Berserker's Call radius could lower your margin of error when getting into those final fights. All of this is fine and dandy, although I can't help but notice the level 20 Counter Helix proccing on Axe's auto attacks. I mean, theoretically, you could build all attack speed items on him, maybe even go for a position 1 build. I wonder what a hard carry Axe build would even look like.
Nanda, こんなもんでしまいか。いいじゃねえか、最高だ。
Axe is a long-standing member of Dota's roster, and for good reason. His memorable look, his dumb voice, and his head-on style makes you really feel like a beefcake when you play him. What I like the most about Axe is that he doesn't steal other people's videos to do iPhone 7 giveaways. And you know why he doesn't? Because he's just a cool guy. Be cool like him. I'm Dennis the Tall, and that was the history of Axe. Thank you for stopping by. Why don't you go ahead and watch these other videos so that Valve might notice me and send me a crate of micro plushes. Follow the Twitter, I post normal ass stuff with updates to Dotaology there. Follow Rebecca Crossing on Instagram. She drew the Axe anime scene and is a talented artist who deserves all of your support. Also, I don't have an air conditioner, so if you want to mail me some ice cubes or something, I would really appreciate it. The weather's getting bonkers over here.